Ever smelled something so foul it made you gag? Did you know our ancestors lived with these horrific stenches daily? Could you imagine working in conditions so putrid that entire industries were banished to the outskirts of towns? Number 10. The legacy of medieval tanning. What happened to all those medieval tanneries? While most have disappeared into history, their impact remains embedded in our modern world. In many European cities, street names like Tanner's Lane or Leather Street reveal where these smelly operations once stood. Archaeological digs frequently uncover the remains of tanning pits, complete with preserved leather scraps and tools that give us glimpses into this ancient craft. Family names like Tanner, Barker, and Leather emerged directly from this profession, passed down through generations as lasting reminders of ancestors who practiced this essential trade. Museums across Europe display medieval leather goods that have survived centuries: shoes worn by ordinary citizens, ornate bookbindings commissioned by wealthy patrons, and armor components that protected knights in battle. Perhaps most surprisingly, some traditional tanneries still operate using methods that would be recognizable to medieval craftsmen. In places like Fez, Morocco, visitors can witness tanning practices that have changed little over the centuries, where workers still stand waist-deep in colored dyeing vats, processing hides much as their predecessors did 1,000 years ago. The sights and smells offer a visceral connection to medieval life that few other experiences can match. Modern leather workers often study medieval techniques to understand the craft's origins, sometimes incorporating traditional methods into contemporary production. Environmental historians examine medieval tanning practices to understand early industrial pollution, as the acids and organic waste from these operations represent some of humanity's first large-scale environmental impacts. When you next handle a leather item, consider its connection to this ancient, smelly craft that helped build medieval economies while testing the olfactory tolerance of everyone unfortunate enough to live downwind. Number 9. Fashion and function: medieval leather products. What treasures emerged from all this smelly labor? The finished leather products were astonishingly diverse and touched every aspect of medieval life. Footwear ranged from simple peasant shoes to elaborately decorated boots for nobility. Cobblers crafted these essential items to protect feet from rough terrain and cold weather, with designs adapted to different social classes and occupations. Clothing incorporated leather in surprising ways. While full leather garments were uncommon except for specialized workers, leather components reinforced fabric clothing at stress points. Belts, purses, and pouches became practical necessities for carrying personal items in an era before pockets became common in clothing. Military applications drove significant demand for leather. Shields received leather coverings for durability, while armor included leather components either on their own or as backing for metal plates. Swordsmen relied on leather scabbards and grips, and archers couldn't function without leather quivers and wrist guards. The medieval home contained numerous leather items. Water buckets, storage containers, and even primitive fire hoses used leather because of its waterproof properties. Furniture incorporated leather as coverings for chairs and benches among the wealthy. Even windows sometimes used oiled, translucent leather instead of expensive glass. Bookmaking depended heavily on tanned animal skins. Parchment from sheep or goats and vellum from calves provided writing surfaces, while leather bindings protected these precious manuscripts. Monastic scriptoria maintained close relationships with local tanners to ensure supplies for their intellectual work. Transportation relied on leather for bridles, saddles, harnesses, and carriage components. Without these essential items, the movement of people and goods would have been severely limited. Farmers needed leather for agricultural tools, from plow harnesses to thrashing flails. Even musical instruments incorporated tanned hides. Drums obviously required stretched leather surfaces, but other instruments used leather components for bellows, bindings, and decorative elements. The full extent of leather use in medieval society might never be fully documented because it touched virtually every aspect of daily life. Number 8. The social stigma: tanners in medieval society. Would you befriend someone who constantly reeked of urine and rotting flesh? Medieval people faced this exact dilemma with tanners. Despite producing essential goods, tanners occupied a contradictory social position, economically vital yet socially marginalized. The persistent stench clung to their clothes, hair, and homes, making social integration challenging even on days away from work. Religious considerations further complicated tanners' status. Christian doctrine viewed contact with dead animals as potentially defiling, creating theological suspicion around the profession. Jewish and Muslim communities had similar concerns, though religious law made specific accommodations for this necessary trade. Some religious authorities questioned whether tanners could enter holy spaces without special purification. Legal restrictions reflected these social attitudes. Many medieval towns enacted ordinances confining tanneries to specific districts, usually downwind and downstream from other residences. These tanners' quarters became identifiable neighborhoods with their own distinct communities and customs, separated from mainstream society by both geography and prejudice. Marriage prospects for tanners' families faced complications. While tanners could often afford dowries comparable to other craftsmen, some families hesitated to marry their children into tanning households. Yet economic realities sometimes overcame these prejudices, particularly when a tanning operation represented a valuable inheritance. Guild membership provided tanners with a measure of protection and social standing. Leather workers' guilds fought for recognition of their craft's importance, establishing quality standards and training procedures that elevated the profession's reputation. These organizations also provided crucial social support, creating bonds among families who shared their malodorous circumstances. Children of tanners often followed in their parents' footsteps not just from tradition, but because other apprenticeship opportunities might be limited by social prejudice. The smell that permeated their homes made them recognizable and sometimes unwelcome in other workshops. Despite these challenges, successful master tanners could achieve significant wealth and influence within their communities. Their essential economic role sometimes overcame social stigma, particularly in smaller communities where personal relationships transcended occupational prejudice. Number 7. Tools of the malodorous trade. What strange implements filled a medieval tanner's workshop? The specialized tools of the tanning trade reflected both the craft's complexity and its physical demands. Before any tanning could begin, preparation tools came into play. Fleshing knives with curved, two-handled blades removed residual meat and fat from skins, while scraping frames held hides taut during this messy process. Soaking vessels ranged from simple wooden barrels to stone-lined pits, depending on the tannery's size and prosperity. These containers held the lime solutions for dehairing and the tanning liquors for the actual preservation process. Workers used long wooden poles with hooked ends to manipulate heavy, waterlogged hides without entering the noxious solutions themselves. Beaming knives and beaming boards formed an essential combination. The curved beaming board supported hides while tanners used specialized knives to remove hair and prepare the grained surface of the leather. These tools required regular maintenance to maintain their effectiveness through caustic working conditions. Grinding equipment processed tan bark into usable material. Hand-operated mills crushed oak bark into smaller pieces that would release their tannins more effectively. Larger operations sometimes used water-powered mills for this labor-intensive process, particularly as the medieval period progressed. Stretching frames and drying racks allowed processed leather to be properly shaped and dried. Wooden frames with adjustable pegs stretched leather to prevent shrinkage and maintain desired dimensions. These frames often stood in dedicated drying areas with controlled exposure to sunlight and air circulation. Finishing tools included pumice stones for smoothing grain surfaces, burnishers made from glass or stone for creating shine, and various implements for applying oils and fats during the currying process. Specialized shears and cutting tools then transformed finished leather into workable pieces for other craftsmen. Measuring and testing equipment helped maintain quality control. Experienced tanners evaluated leather by sight, touch, and sometimes taste, yes, really, but also employed thickness gauges and flexibility tests to ensure consistent output. The wooden storage containers and shelving completed the tanner's equipment collection. Different leather grades and types required separate storage, organized according to the tannery's particular specialties and customer needs. Number 6. Dyeing and decorating, adding color and design. How did medieval leather get its color? Natural leather's limited color palette didn't satisfy the medieval appetite for vibrant personal possessions. Tanners and leather workers developed sophisticated techniques to transform plain leather into decorative items that displayed wealth and status. Plant-based dyes provided the most common coloring agents. Woad and indigo created blues, madder root produced reds, and weld or saffron yielded yellows. Tanners gathered these materials from local sources or purchased them through merchants connected to distant trading networks. The most vivid colors commanded premium prices, making brightly colored leather items symbols of prosperity. Application methods varied by region and tradition. Some tanners immersed entire hides in dye baths, while others applied colors to specific areas using brushes made from animal hair. Multiple dye applications created deeper colors, though each additional process increased a product's final cost. Metal salts served as mordants to fix colors and prevent fading. Iron, copper, and alum compounds helped dyes bond to leather fibers, creating more color-fast results. These treatments sometimes changed the leather's texture and flexibility, requiring skilled adjusters to maintain quality. Tooling and stamping decorated leather surfaces with patterns and images. Craftsmen used metal dies and wooden stamps to impress designs into dampened leather. These decorative elements ranged from simple geometric patterns to elaborate pictorial scenes on luxury items. Painting directly onto leather surfaces created precise designs impossible to achieve through dyeing alone. Artisans developed specialized paint formulations that maintained flexibility without cracking when the leather bent during use. Gold leaf application added ultimate luxury to items destined for noble or ecclesiastical use. Punching and cutting techniques created both decorative and functional elements. Perforations added ventilation to summer footwear, while cut-out designs allowed contrasting colors to show through from under layers. These techniques required exceptional precision to avoid weakening the leather structure. Leather from different animals accepted dyes differently, leading to specialized applications. Goatskin often received intricate decoration for book bindings, while sturdier cowhide took simpler, more durable treatments for everyday items. The combination of animal source, tanning method, and decorative technique created virtually endless variations in finished products. Number 5. From apprentice to master, learning the tanner's craft. How long would you work before earning independence in this stinky trade? Medieval tanning, like other crafts, operated under a strict apprenticeship system that transformed novices into skilled practitioners. Young apprentices, usually boys between ages 8 and 14, entered binding agreements with master tanners who provided training, food, shelter, and occasionally minimal wages in exchange for labor and obedience. These beginners started with the simplest, most unpleasant tasks. Cleaning tanning pits, moving heavy hides, and grinding oak bark gave apprentices their first experiences with the trade's physical demands and distinctive smells. Early training emphasized building strength and endurance for this physically demanding profession. As apprentices proved reliable, they graduated to more skilled work. Preparing hides by removing flesh and hair required developing touch and judgment that came only through practice. Masters closely supervised these intermediate steps since mistakes could ruin valuable raw materials. Technical knowledge transferred through demonstration rather than written instruction, as literacy remained uncommon. Apprentices learned to recognize the subtle changes in hides at various processing stages, developing sensory expertise that no manual could adequately capture. They memorized recipes for tanning solutions and treatment schedules that varied by season and hide type. After several years of training, typically 5 to 7 depending on regional customs, apprentices might become journeymen. These workers received wages but remained under master supervision, refining their skills while gaining independence. Journeymen often traveled between workshops, gathering techniques from different masters before settling into their own practice. Achieving master status required creating a masterpiece, a demonstration item showing perfect execution of tanning techniques for evaluation by guild leadership. Successful candidates gain permission to establish independent workshops, take on apprentices, and participate in guild governance. However, economic realities often delayed this step, as establishing a new tannery required significant capital for equipment and initial supplies. Family connections significantly influenced advancement. Sons of tanners enjoyed advantages in training and eventual workshop inheritance, creating tanning dynasties that passed techniques through generations. Outside, apprentices faced greater challenges in establishing independent operations unless they married into tanning families. The knowledge transfer system preserved techniques while allowing for incremental innovation. Each generation of tanners contributed small improvements to processes, gradually refining this ancient craft without dramatic disruptions to traditional methods. Number 4. The environmental impact, medieval pollution problems. Did medieval people care about industrial pollution? The environmental footprint of tanning operations created significant challenges for medieval communities long before the concept of environmental protection existed. Tanneries consumed natural resources at alarming rates, particularly oak bark harvested from surrounding forests. This demand contributed to deforestation around major tanning centers, with some regions experiencing noticeable woodland depletion by the late medieval period. Water pollution emerged as the most immediate environmental concern. Tanneries required enormous water volumes, which they returned to streams and rivers laden with organic waste, lime, tannins, and various processing chemicals. Downstream waters became discolored, foul-smelling, and depleted of fish that couldn't survive in the contaminated conditions. Local authorities recognized these problems despite lacking scientific understanding of pollution. Town ordinances frequently addressed tannery waste disposal, requiring operations to locate downstream from population centers and sometimes mandating specific discharge practices. These represent some of history's earliest industrial pollution regulations. Waste disposal created further complications. Solid waste from tanning, scraps of flesh, hair, and damaged hides attracted vermin and generated additional odors when improperly discarded. More organized tanneries developed relationships with other craftsmen who could use these byproducts, creating early examples of industrial symbiosis. The cumulative impact of multiple tanneries operating in close proximity magnified these environmental problems. Major leather-producing centers like Northampton in England or Cordoba in Spain concentrated dozens of operations along single waterways, overwhelming the environment's natural ability to absorb waste. Public health suffered consequences even without understanding germ theory. Tanning districts experienced higher rates of certain illnesses, though contemporary observers attributed these to bad air rather than contaminated water or specific chemical exposures. Workers directly handling the caustic substances suffered skin ailments and respiratory problems as occupational hazards. Archaeological evidence reveals the lasting impact of medieval tanneries. Modern excavations of former tanning sites still show soil contamination with heavy metals and altered pH levels centuries after operations ceased. River sediments near historical tanning districts likewise contain identifiable pollution layers corresponding to periods of intensive production. Despite these problems, the economic necessity of leather production meant that environmental concerns remained secondary to manufacturing needs throughout the medieval period. Communities accepted the pollution as an unavoidable cost of essential economic activity. Number 3. International trade, the leather economy. How far could a cowhide travel in medieval times? The leather trade created economic connections spanning continents, linking rural herdsmen to urban craftsmen and distant markets. Different regions developed specialized reputations based on their distinctive production techniques and local materials. Spanish leather from Córdoba became so renowned for its quality that cordwainer became the standard term for fine leather workers throughout Europe. Rawhide procurement operated through complex networks. Butchers supplied local hides, while merchants organized collection from rural slaughterhouses and transported them to urban tanning centers. Larger operations imported hides from considerable distances, with Baltic and Scandinavian hides particularly valued for their size and quality due to the larger cattle breeds in northern regions. Tanning materials likewise traveled through established trade routes. Oak bark represented the primary tanning agent in northern Europe, while southern regions utilized sumac and other local plant sources. Alum, an essential mineral for certain tanning processes, moved through Mediterranean trade networks from sources in Italy and the Eastern Mediterranean. Finished leather products achieved even wider distribution than raw materials. Leather goods manufactured in major centers like Florence, Paris, and London reached markets across Europe and beyond. Luxury items traveled furthest. Decorated leather wall coverings, fine bookbindings, and leather fashion accessories appeared in wealthy households across the medieval world. Military demand drove substantial international leather commerce. Armies required massive quantities of leather for equipment, creating surge demands that local production often couldn't satisfy. Military campaigns sometimes organized dedicated supply chains for leather goods essential to their operations. Leather quality standards emerged to facilitate trade across language and cultural barriers. Guild regulations established recognizable grades and categories that allowed merchants to negotiate prices for shipments without personally inspecting every item. Marks stamped into leather identified its origin and quality, providing early examples of product branding. Taxation and regulation of leather trade generated significant government revenue. Leather goods faced inspection at city gates, with taxes collected based on quantity and quality. Some regions established official leather markets where all transactions had to occur under government supervision, ensuring proper tax collection and quality control. Political conflicts frequently disrupted these international networks. Trade embargoes, warfare, and changing political alliances redirected leather commerce, sometimes stimulating domestic production when imports became unavailable. The adaptability of the medieval leather economy allowed it to recover from these disruptions, finding new supply routes and market opportunities. Number 2, the chemistry behind the stench. What chemical reactions created those infamous smells? Medieval tanners performed sophisticated chemistry without understanding the science behind their work. The preservation process relied on complex biochemical reactions that transformed putrescible skin into durable leather through several malodorous stages. The initial liming process created the first truly offensive odors. Soaking raw hides in lime solutions, calcium hydroxide, loosened hair and outer skin layers while breaking down proteins. This alkaline environment caused partial decomposition of remaining organic materials, releasing compounds containing sulfur and nitrogen that produced distinctively foul aromas. Removing the lime required another smelly step. Tanners placed hides in solutions containing fermented grain, animal dung, or stale urine. These acidic substances neutralized the alkaline lime while introducing beneficial bacteria that prepared protein fibers for the tanning process. The ammonia from urine combined with other compounds to create a particularly pungent workspace atmosphere. The actual tanning process using vegetable materials like oak bark created less offensive but still distinctive smells. Tannins extracted from bark reacted with collagen proteins in the hide, creating complex compounds that resisted decomposition. This biochemical reaction produced earthy, astringent odors reminiscent of wet vegetation and strong tea. Oils and fats applied during finishing, currying, added their own olfactory contributions. Animal fats, fish oils, and tallows penetrated leather fibers to maintain flexibility, each bringing characteristic smells that varied from merely unpleasant to genuinely revolting, particularly when rancidity developed in older materials. Different animal sources created variations in both process and resultant odors. Cattle hides, sheepskins, and goat skins contain different protein structures and fat contents, requiring adjusted techniques and creating distinctive smell profiles during processing. Weather conditions dramatically affected odor intensity. Summer heat accelerated decomposition and chemical reactions, making tannery districts nearly unbearable during warm months. Winter brought some olfactory relief, though the basic processes remained smelly regardless of season. The combination of these chemical processes created the unique sensory experience that made tanneries instantly recognizable from considerable distances. Modern chemistry has identified the specific compounds responsible: hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, volatile fatty acids, and various amines, but medieval workers and their neighbors experienced the full olfactory assault without understanding its molecular origins. Number 1. The basic process, from living animal to leather. How did stinking, rotting animal skins become durable, useful leather? The transformation began immediately after slaughter. Fresh hides arrived at tanneries still wet with blood and covered in flesh, requiring immediate attention to prevent decomposition. Workers salted hides that couldn't be processed immediately, temporarily halting bacterial action through dehydration. The first true processing step, soaking, removed salt, blood, and dirt while rehydrating preserved hides. Tanners immersed skins in water-filled vats, changing the liquid several times over days until the material softened properly. This seemingly simple step required careful judgment. Too little soaking left hides stiff, too much began decomposition processes. Dehairing followed, using calcium hydroxide, lime, solutions to loosen hair and the outer epidermis layer. Hides soaked in these caustic mixtures for days or weeks, with workers periodically checking progress by testing hair removal ease. The alkaline solution caused the hide to swell while breaking down unwanted proteins, preparing the collagen structure for tanning. After liming came the truly disgusting part, deliming and baiting. To neutralize the lime, tanners used acidic solutions often containing animal dung or stale urine. These foul mixtures balanced the hide's pH while introducing enzymes that further prepared the collagen fibers. This biochemical preparation determined the final leather's softness and flexibility. The actual tanning process then began. Vegetable tanning, the most common medieval method, used tannins extracted from oak bark, sumac leaves, or other plant materials. Workers layered hides with crushed bark in pits or vats, where the tannins slowly penetrated the material, chemically binding with collagen proteins to create stable compounds resistant to decomposition. This process often took months to complete thoroughly. Once tanned, hides required substantial finishing work. Currying, treating leather with oils and fats, restored flexibility lost during tanning. Workers manually worked these substances into the leather, stretching and folding it repeatedly to ensure thorough penetration. Different oil combinations produced leathers suited for specific applications, from soft gloves to weather-resistant boots. Final steps included stretching leather to the desired thickness, trimming edges, and sorting finished products by quality. The entire process from raw hide to completed leather typically took between 6 months and 2 years, depending on the specific techniques used and the desired characteristics of the finished product. This lengthy transformation represented a significant capital investment in materials and labor, explaining the substantial value attached to finished leather goods throughout the medieval economy. Ever wondered why medieval cities sometimes banned tanneries within their walls? Would you have had the stomach to work in this essential but reviled profession?